Every morning, millions of people begin their day the exact same way. A few slices of toast, a sandwich at lunch, maybe bread with dinner. Sometimes crackers, buns, bagels, pastries, or wraps in between. It feels normal, comforting even. Bread has been part of human life for generations. It's one of the most common foods on earth. And because it feels so ordinary, most people never stop to ask an important question. What is this food actually doing to my body every single day? Because something strange has happened over the last few decades. People are eating more convenient foods than ever before. Yet energy levels are collapsing. Belly fat is increasing. Blood sugar problems are rising. Inflammation is becoming more common. And millions of adults over 50 say the same thing. I don't eat that much, so why do I feel worse every year? And hidden inside that question is a truth most people never hear clearly enough. It's not always how much you eat. Sometimes it's what your food is repeatedly signaling to your body. Especially after age 45 or 50, when metabolism changes in ways most people were never taught to understand. Because your body after midlife does not process food the same way it did at 25, blood sugar regulation changes, muscle mass slowly declines, insulin sensitivity weakens, inflammation becomes easier to trigger, recovery slows down, and the body becomes far less forgiving of constant processed carbohydrates. Which means that innocent-looking slice of bread may affect your biology far more than you realize. But here's where this conversation becomes important. Bread itself is not automatically bad. That's the simplistic thinking that creates confusion. The real story is far more interesting. Because what happens to your health when you eat bread daily depends heavily on three things: the type of bread, the condition of your metabolism, and what bread is replacing in your diet. And once you understand those three factors, many frustrating symptoms suddenly begin making sense. Especially the symptoms millions of adults quietly struggle with every day. The fatigue after meals, the stubborn belly fat, the cravings at night, the brain fog, the rising blood sugar, the energy crashes, the feeling that your body is slowing down no matter what you try. And perhaps most importantly, you'll understand why many people blame aging alone for problems that are actually being amplified by modern eating habits. Because what most people call bread today is very different from traditional bread humans once ate. Modern processed bread is often made from highly refined flour that digests extremely quickly inside the body. And when refined carbohydrates digest rapidly, blood sugar rises fast. Now at first, this may not seem like a major problem. Your body releases insulin to manage the sugar. Energy briefly rises. You feel satisfied for a while, but then something happens many people know all too well. A few hours later, energy crashes, hunger returns, cravings increase, mental clarity drops, and suddenly you're searching for another quick source of energy again. This cycle becomes especially powerful after 50 because insulin sensitivity naturally declines with age. Now, insulin is not the enemy. Insulin is actually a survival hormone. Its job is to move sugar from the bloodstream into cells for energy. But when the body is constantly flooded with rapidly digested carbohydrates day after day, year after year, insulin levels can remain elevated far too often. And over time, the cells begin responding less efficiently. This is called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is deeply connected to many of the symptoms people experience after midlife. Belly fat, fatigue, inflammation, high triglycerides, blood sugar problems, energy crashes, difficulty losing weight. And here's what makes this fascinating. Many people struggling with insulin resistance don't necessarily eat huge amounts of food. They simply eat foods that keep pushing blood sugar upward repeatedly throughout the day. Toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, snacks in between, desserts at night. The body never truly gets a break from glucose overload. And this is where bread becomes more than just bread. It becomes a repeated metabolic signal. Now, does that mean every person should completely eliminate bread forever? Not necessarily, because context matters enormously. There's a major difference between highly processed white bread and slower digesting whole grain bread with fiber and protein. And fiber changes everything. Fiber slows digestion, reduces blood sugar spikes, supports gut health, improves fullness, helps stabilize energy. But here's the hidden problem. Many breads marketed as healthy are still heavily processed and surprisingly low in real fiber. Words like multigrain, wheat, made with grains can sound healthy while still causing rapid blood sugar spikes. This is why reading labels matters far more than clever packaging. And there's another hidden issue most people never connect to daily bread consumption: inflammation. When blood sugar repeatedly spikes and crashes, inflammation tends to rise quietly over time. Now, inflammation is not always dramatic. Sometimes it feels like joint stiffness, fatigue, brain fog, poor sleep, bloating, slow recovery, low energy. And many adults begin assuming this is simply normal aging. But often, modern processed eating patterns are quietly amplifying these symptoms, especially when bread replaces more nourishing foods. Because here's something important many people never realize. The body after 50 desperately needs more protein than most people consume, not less. Protein helps preserve muscle, supports metabolism, improves blood sugar control, supports recovery, reduces cravings, protects healthy aging. But what happens in many modern diets? Breakfast becomes toast or cereal, lunch becomes sandwiches, snacks become crackers, dinner includes more refined carbohydrates. Meanwhile, protein intake quietly declines, and over time, muscle mass gradually disappears. This matters because muscle is one of the body's greatest metabolic protectors. Healthy muscle helps absorb glucose from the bloodstream, but when muscle declines, blood sugar becomes harder to regulate, which partly explains why belly fat becomes more stubborn after midlife. The body becomes metabolically weaker, and this is why many adults feel trapped in a cycle that seems impossible to escape. They eat quick carbohydrates for energy, then crash, then crave more carbohydrates, then store more fat, then feel more tired. And because fatigue increases, movement decreases too, which worsens insulin resistance even further. It becomes a biological cycle, not a lack of willpower. And perhaps that's one of the most important truths people need to hear. Your body is not lazy. Your metabolism is responding to repeated signals. Now, there's another reason daily bread consumption affects some people more strongly than others: gut health. Inside your digestive system live trillions of bacteria that influence digestion, inflammation, metabolism, immunity, and even mood. And highly processed foods tend to feed a very different gut environment than whole foods rich in fiber and nutrients. This is why some people experience bloating, digestive discomfort, or sluggishness after eating certain breads regularly, especially highly processed varieties low in fiber. Now, this doesn't mean everyone has a gluten problem. That's another area where confusion has exploded online. Some people truly do have medical gluten sensitivities or celiac disease, but for many others, the bigger issue may actually be the ultra-processing, low-fiber, blood sugar impact and overall dietary patterns surrounding modern bread products. And this is where the conversation becomes more hopeful, because small changes can create surprisingly meaningful improvements over time. For example, many people notice better energy simply by changing the structure of breakfast. Instead of starting the day with mostly refined carbohydrates, they include more protein, fiber, and healthy fats. Eggs, Greek yogurt, oats, nuts, fruit, vegetables, protein-rich whole foods. This helps stabilize blood sugar much more effectively, and stable blood sugar changes far more than people realize. Energy becomes steadier, cravings decrease, mental clarity improves, hunger becomes easier to control. The body begins operating more calmly, because constant blood sugar chaos is exhausting for human biology. And there's another hidden effect of eating processed bread daily that many people never connect to their symptoms: water retention. Highly processed, carbohydrate-heavy diets often cause the body to hold more water, especially when paired with excess sodium and low potassium intake. This can contribute to puffiness, bloating, swelling, weight fluctuations, and many people think they are gaining large amounts of fat when part of the issue is actually inflammation and fluid retention, which is why some individuals feel dramatically lighter within days of reducing processed carbohydrates, even before significant fat loss occurs. The body simply becomes less inflamed. Now, there's something emotionally important here. Many adults feel overwhelmed by food advice today. One expert says carbs are terrible, another says fat is dangerous, another says plants are everything, another says only meat matters, and eventually people become exhausted and confused. But the body itself is actually giving clues constantly. Stable energy after meals, usually a good sign. Constant crashes and cravings, the body may be struggling. Feeling hungry again immediately after eating, the meal may lack protein or fiber. Bloating and fatigue after processed foods, the body may be overwhelmed. Your biology is always communicating. And this is why awareness matters more than rigid rules. Because the goal is not fear, the goal is understanding. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest hidden consequences of daily processed bread consumption after 50. Fatty liver. Many people think fatty liver only happens from alcohol. But one of the fastest growing health issues worldwide is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, often driven by insulin resistance and excess processed carbohydrates. When blood sugar and insulin remain elevated too often, the liver begins converting excess glucose into fat. And over time, fat accumulates inside the liver itself. This matters because the liver plays a central role in metabolism, hormone regulation, detoxification, and energy balance. And here's what makes this especially concerning. Fatty liver often develops silently. No pain, no dramatic symptoms, just slowly worsening metabolic health. This is why blood sugar stability matters so much more than people realize. And perhaps this is the hidden truth underneath this entire conversation. The body after 50 becomes far more sensitive to repeated metabolic stress. Not because the body is weak, but because the margin for nutritional error becomes smaller. Which means the foods you eat consistently matter more than ever before. Now, does this mean bread can never fit into a healthy lifestyle? Absolutely not. Traditional sourdough bread, whole grain bread with real fiber, or bread eaten alongside protein and healthy fats affects the body very differently than ultra-processed white bread eaten alone. Context changes biology. For example, bread with eggs, avocado, and protein-rich foods digests more slowly than bread eaten by itself. Fiber and protein help reduce rapid glucose spikes. This is why balanced meals matter far more than isolated food fear. And one of the healthiest mindset shifts people can make is this. Stop asking, is this food good or bad? And start asking, how does this food affect my body repeatedly over time? Because health is shaped by patterns, not single meals. Now, there's another fascinating thing that happens when people reduce highly processed breads and refined carbohydrates for a few weeks. Taste changes. Many people suddenly realize how intensely processed foods were stimulating cravings. Whole foods begin tasting better. Natural sweetness becomes more noticeable. Appetite stabilizes. And this happens because highly processed foods often hijack reward pathways in the brain. Quick sugar, quick dopamine, quick energy, but not lasting nourishment, which is why many people feel trapped in cycles of constant snacking. The body is seeking stable fuel, but keeps receiving temporary stimulation instead. And perhaps that explains why so many adults feel tired despite eating constantly. The body may be full of calories, but starving for nourishment. Now, there's something encouraging about all of this. The body is incredibly adaptive. Even after years of poor habits, biology can still respond positively to better support. Sometimes within weeks, people notice more stable energy, reduced bloating, better sleep, improved digestion, less brain fog, fewer cravings. Then gradually, improved blood sugar, reduced belly fat, better mobility, lower inflammation, more consistent energy. Not because of extreme dieting, but because the body is finally receiving more stable metabolic signals. And this is why sustainability matters so much. Extreme restriction often creates stress and rebound eating. But realistic changes create consistency. More whole foods, more protein, more fiber, more movement, better sleep, fewer processed carbohydrates. Simple patterns repeated daily. And maybe the most important thing to understand is this: bread itself is not the villain. The real issue is the modern metabolic environment many people live in. Too much sitting, too much stress, too little muscle, too little sleep, too many processed foods, too much blood sugar instability. Processed bread simply becomes one piece of a much larger biological picture. And once people understand that picture, everything changes emotionally, because they stop blaming themselves. They stop thinking, my body is failing, and start realizing, my metabolism has been overwhelmed for years. That realization creates something powerful: hope, because overwhelmed systems can often improve when given the right support consistently. And if you've been struggling with fatigue, stubborn weight gain, cravings, or low energy lately, please remember this. Your body is not trying to punish you. It's adapting to repeated signals. Every meal matters. Every walk matters. Every night of sleep matters. Every protein-rich breakfast matters. Small choices repeated consistently create biological momentum. And often, the most powerful health changes begin quietly beneath the surface before you ever see them in the mirror. That's how real healing works. Not dramatically, but steadily. And in our next documentary, we're going to uncover one of the most misunderstood health topics after 50. The hidden connection between breakfast habits, insulin spikes, and why some people feel exhausted just 2 hours after eating what they thought was a healthy meal. Because one common morning routine may be slowing your metabolism far more than you realize.